Many people have misconceptions about what cherubim actually look like, often picturing them as chubby, winged babies or angels. But the biblical descriptions paint a much more complex and mysterious picture. Let's start by looking at some of the key passages that describe cherubim in the Old Testament. One of the most detailed accounts comes from the book of Ezekiel. In chapter 1, the prophet Ezekiel has a vision of the heavenly throne of God, and he describes what he sees in vivid detail. One of the most detailed accounts comes from the book of Ezekiel. In chapter 1, the prophet Ezekiel has a vision of the heavenly throne of God, and he describes what he sees in vivid detail. As I looked, I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like for living creatures. In appearance their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings on their 4 sides they had human hands. All 4 of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead, they did not turn as they moved. Ezekiel goes on to describe the creatures in even more detail, noting that each had 4 faces, the face of a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. Their bodies were covered in dazzling, gem-like scales, and fire seemed to be constantly flickering among them. This is certainly a far cry from the chubby cherubs we often see depicted in art and culture. These are clearly not cute, cuddly angels, but rather immensely powerful, otherworldly beings. The mention of 4 faces and 4 wings is a key detail that comes up repeatedly in biblical descriptions of cherubim. Another important passage is found in the book of Exodus, when God instructs the Israelites to construct the Ark of the Covenant. As part of this, they are told to make 2 cherubim of gold to be placed on the cover of the ark. Make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the end of the atonement cover. Make 1 cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the atonement cover positioned over it. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the atonement cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking toward the atonement cover. So here we see that the cherubim were depicted as winged, gold figures positioned atop the Ark of the Covenant. Their wings were spread upward, and they faced each other while looking down toward the atonement cover. This gives us another clue about their appearance and function. Interestingly, the Bible also describes cherubim guarding the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve were expelled. In Genesis 3, it says, "After he drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life." So these cherubim were stationed at the entrance to the garden, wielding a flaming sword to prevent anyone from entering. This again suggests a powerful, fearsome quality to these angelic beings. The imagery of cherubim is also found in the visions of the prophet Isaiah. In chapter 6, Isaiah describes a vision of God's throne room, where he sees seraphim, a class of angelic beings that seem closely related to cherubim. These seraphim are described as having 6 wings, with 2 wings covering their faces, 2 covering their feet, and 2 for flying. Isaiah writes, "Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, the whole earth is full of his glory.'" The mention of the seraphim covering their faces and feet is an interesting detail, perhaps suggesting a reverence and humility before the awesome presence of God. Their continual worship and proclamation of God's holiness also reveals something of the cherubims, or seraphim's, role as heavenly attendants before the divine throne. Now, in addition to these key biblical passages, we also have some other ancient sources that provide additional insight into the appearance of cherubim. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century AD, describes the cherubim that were placed on the Ark of the Covenant. Now the cherubims are winged creatures, but their form is not like that of any living creature seen by man. The shape of their body is that of a child's, but they have the legs and feet of a 4-footed beast, like those of a lion, and their wings are like the wings of a bird. When God's presence rests between them, then we may think of him as really dwelling with us. This is a fascinating description that builds on the biblical accounts. Josephus portrays the cherubim as having a human-like body, but with the legs, feet, and wings of hybrid creatures. He also notes that the presence of God was understood to dwell between the outstretched wings of the cherubim on the ark. Another ancient Jewish text, the Apocalypse of Abraham, provides an even more detailed vision of the cherubim. In this text, the patriarch Abraham has a vision of the heavenly throne room, and he describes the cherubim in vivid detail. "And I looked, and I saw, and behold, on the firmament that was over their heads was something like lapis lazuli in appearance, resembling a throne. And upon the throne was a figure in human form. And upward from what had the appearance of his waist I saw as it were gleaming bronze, like the appearance of fire enclosed all around. And downward from what had the appearance of his waist I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and there was brightness all around him. And in the fire was the appearance of electrum, and in the fire the appearance of fire round about. And I saw as it were a river of fire flashing forth, and the glory all around him was great. And round about him were the cherubim, and they had 6 wings, and with 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew." This incredible vision describes the cherubim as being 6-winged, similar to the seraphim in Isaiah's vision. But it adds even more intriguing details. The cherubim are surrounding the divine throne, and they cover their faces and feet in an act of reverence and humility before the awesome presence of God. The description of the cherubim's appearance is also quite striking, with their bodies appearing to be made of bronze, fire, and electrum, a shiny gold-silver alloy. This further reinforces the sense of the cherubim as otherworldly, almost alien-like beings, radiating divine power and glory. So when we put all of these biblical and ancient Jewish accounts together, a fairly consistent picture emerges of what the cherubim truly looked like. They were not cute, chubby angels, but rather majestic, powerful, and awe-inspiring creatures with multiple faces, multiple wings, and bodies that seemed to be composed of shimmering, gem-like materials. Their primary role appears to be as guardians and attendants of God's throne and presence, worshipping Him continually and wielding flaming swords to protect the sacred. They are depicted as being deeply reverent and humble before the overwhelming glory of the divine, covering their faces and feet in an act of worship. Interestingly, the cherubim also seem to have a hybrid or composite nature, with aspects of different animals, the human, lion, ox, and eagle faces, as well as elements of both the human and the divine. This suggests that they represent a unique class of heavenly beings, blending the earthly and the heavenly, the human and the divine. Some scholars have even proposed that the cherubim may have been inspired by or influenced by the Sphinx or other hybrid mythical creatures found in ancient Near Eastern cultures. The idea of powerful, enigmatic guardian figures with a blend of human and animal features was certainly a common motif in the ancient world. But the biblical authors imbue the cherubim with a distinctly theological significance, portraying them as integral parts of God's heavenly throne room and intimately connected to His manifest presence and glory. They are not mere mythical creatures, but spiritual realities that point to the majesty, power, and transcendence of the one true God. So in summary, the biblical and ancient Jewish descriptions paint a picture of the cherubim as awe-inspiring, otherworldly beings, part human, part animal, part divine. They are not sweet, chubby angels, but rather mysterious, powerful guardians of God's holiness and presence. Their composite nature and multifaceted appearances reveal the complexity and mystery of the spiritual realm, and the sheer otherness of the divine.